American Airlines Flight 838, A Journey into Chaos. Introduction: a calm departure turned awry. On the morning of October 15, 1997, American Airlines Flight 838, a Boeing 767-3000, prepared to depart from Miami International Airport, MIA, heading toward London Heathrow Airport, LHR. The aircraft was fully loaded with 212 passengers and 10 crew members. Many were heading to London for business meetings, vacations, and family reunions, unaware that they would soon be at the center of a life-threatening crisis. The aircraft, commanded by a seasoned captain with over 20 years of flying experience, made its way down the runway for takeoff. There were no signs of trouble, and as the plane soared into the sky, passengers settled into their seats, enjoying in-flight entertainment or relaxing in preparation for the long flight ahead. At first, it was a routine journey, but in the skies above the Atlantic Ocean, danger was looming, unseen. The warning sign. And about 2 hours into the flight, while cruising at an altitude of approximately 3,500 feet, the aircraft began to experience an unusual anomaly. In the cockpit, a red warning light illuminated, signaling a hydraulic failure in the aircraft's main control systems. The hydraulic system is critical to the operation of essential aircraft functions, such as controlling the flight's surfaces, landing gear, and flaps. In the event of a failure, pilots lose the ability to manipulate key elements of the plane, such as adjusting the flaps during descent and managing the landing gear for a safe touchdown. The emergency defined exactly what was wrong. The pilot was determined to get as far away from the president and his family as possible. The flight crew immediately began to assess the situation, consulting the plane's manuals and troubleshooting systems. The captain and first officer confirmed that the hydraulic pressure was dangerously low, making it impossible to deploy the landing gear in the usual manner. The emergency hydraulic systems were activated, but they provided limited backup power. The calm before the storm. The first officer took the initiative to communicate with Shannon Air Traffic Control, ATC, which provided instructions and advised that the flight was clear to divert to Shannon Airport, located on the western coast of Ireland. At this stage, the crew kept the situation calm and under control. They assured the passengers that the aircraft was fully capable of completing the journey and that everything was under control. In the cabin, the atmosphere was still calm. The passengers, who were unaware of the exact nature of the issue, continued with their activities. The cabin crew was not yet instructed to prepare for any emergency measures, and everyone followed standard procedures. But the severity of the situation was beginning to sink in for the flight crew. With no guarantee that the landing gear would deploy correctly, the captain made the critical decision to prepare for a belly landing, where the aircraft would land without the use of its main landing gear. The decision to divert. As the hours passed, the situation grew more pressing. The aircraft was too far into the Atlantic to turn back to Miami. The only option was to divert to Shannon, a major refueling stop for transatlantic flights, where emergency services could be on standby to assist in case of a crash landing. To ensure the safety of everyone on board, the flight crew communicated with Shannon Airport's emergency response teams. Plans were set in motion, and the crew began to prepare the passengers for the possible emergency landing. The cabin crew calmly instructed the passengers to fasten their seat belts and put their seat backs in the upright position, though no one knew just how dangerous the situation would become. A tense descent. As Flight 838 descended toward Shannon, the crew faced another challenge. The hydraulic system had failed so thoroughly that it became impossible to use the normal methods of adjusting the flaps and controlling the aircraft's descent rate. This left the pilots with a very narrow window for controlling the aircraft's approach to the runway. The altimeter readouts showed the plane's descent was too steep, but without the proper control over the flaps, the pilots had to manage the descent manually, using the throttle and airspeed to control their descent profile. In the cabin, a wave of anxiety started to spread among the passengers, especially as the flight attendants began preparing for emergency procedures. The oxygen masks were deployed as a precaution, though the cabin crew continued to maintain a composed and professional demeanor. As the plane neared the airport, the Shannon emergency response teams prepared for the worst. Fire trucks and ambulances lined the runway, with police and paramedics positioned at strategic points to ensure they could respond immediately in case of an accident. The emergency landing. As the Boeing 767 crossed the final approach path, the crew deployed the emergency landing gear system. Unfortunately, it was unclear whether the landing gear would fully lock into position. The plane was now committed to landing, with or without the gear in place. The descent was bumpy, with turbulence shaking the aircraft as the pilots tried to stabilize the plane. Aboard, the tension was palpable. Passengers were told to assume the crash position, gripping their armrests and bracing for the worst. Crew members checked seatbelts and made sure all passengers were secure. 77 passengers. With a last, desperate attempt, the captain skillfully brought the aircraft over the runway. The plane touched down with an intense jolt. The nose of the Boeing 767 dipped toward the tarmac as the underside of the fuselage scraped the ground, sending up sparks. The emergency gear was engaged, and the plane skidded along the runway for what felt like an eternity, were the aftermath and survival. Finally, the aircraft came to a stop, just a few hundred feet from the end of the runway. Emergency vehicles were immediately on the scene, racing toward the aircraft, ready to assist with evacuations. Despite the terrifying nature of the landing, all 222 people aboard survived the ordeal, though there were minor injuries reported. The passengers disembarked using the emergency slides, greeted by the smell of burning rubber and the loud echoing sound of emergency sirens. The bravery of the crew, from the pilots to the flight attendants, was immediately hailed. Their quick thinking and steady leadership under pressure had saved the lives of everyone on board. The incident became an example of how professionalism in the face of disaster could make all the difference. Conclusion: a testament to training and preparedness. American Airlines Flight 838 became a case study in aviation safety. Investigators later concluded that the failure of the hydraulic system was caused by a series of malfunctions that went undetected during routine maintenance. The incident led to significant improvements in hydraulic system inspections and backup protocols for aircraft worldwide. Second loads are in the airlock, pilot Robert Back said as he waited passengers to identify what was wrong. The story of Flight 838 remains a powerful reminder of the unpredictability of air travel, the importance of crew training, and the incredible resilience of both passengers and crew when faced with life-threatening challenges. A 10:20 event in 1273 takes place exactly 20 years after Flight 2818 achieved landing.